again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the most disturbing thing you have ever seen? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My dad trying to kill himself. I was just around 8 years old, and my dad walks up to me and says, "I just drank coolant. I'm going to die. Don't tell your mom." He walks over to the couch and sits down. I go and tell my mom, and she calls the police. I grab my younger brother and hide in a closet as my dad tries to fight the police and paramedics. He survived. I know it's not gruesome, but it's nothing an 8-year-old should handle. I saw my coworker blow his arm off in an industrial accident involving an HP hydraulic line rupturing. Blood everywhere. A drowned girl in still water at night. The cops were using their torches, and it gave a weird glow to the water. She was face down, and her hair had spread out. It was truly shit, because we didn't have the kit to reach her. Nearly made me quit my job that it sent me nuts. I was working at a marina, and saw someone get chopped up by a boat propeller. He lost some fingers, and we could see his intestines. He also lost a good chunk of his quad. We turned the bottom of an inflatable boat into a stretcher and carried him from the dock to an ambulance. I was 100% certain he would die, but he survived. I was 15 and had to talk to the guy who ran him over with his boat. He was a complete mess. That conversation left a mark. PSA using a diving flag if you're diving at a busy harbor. I'm a firefighter, so seeing gnarly things is unfortunately a common part of the job. But the one that jumps out the quickest in my mind are a man I knew my whole life hung himself, the charred remains of a woman in a house fire, a dead guy with his eyelids moving due to the maggots under them, an 18-year-old now paralyzed from the chest down after being ejected from a car, and doing CPR on a childhood friend, and having to inform his family that he was gone. There were more, and some may be worse than those, but those ones seem to stand out in my head. My father having a seizure a few weeks before his death. I was holding him up, and I thought he was dying in my arms. Motorcycle rider who got decapitated during a high-speed crash. He came off of his bike across the road from me. His face slammed into a lamppost, his body carried on down the road. Seen someone suicide by train, too. Early spring day. I was walking by the river in a park. I saw an empty kayak go by, but the river was running high from rain and snowmelt, so I didn't think much of it. Then a face-down body went by. Just as I registered what I was seeing, another body came by and got stuck on a log. I could still see his arms dancing in the current. I performed a wellness check on an 80-ish-year-old woman while working an overnight security job at a retirement home. Upon entering, the lights were all turned out. When I entered the bedroom, I saw her laying on the floor. I thought she was dead for sure, but when I went to see if I could help her, she immediately became animated and begged me for help. I've never seen a look in someone's eyes or heard a voice of true desperation like that. That was truly the most disturbing thing I'd seen. She was severely dehydrated and starving. She had been laying there with no help for a couple of days. Miraculously, she ended up surviving that incident and had a more peaceful death a few years later. Life alert was no joke for me after what I saw at that job. I used to work for Child Protection Services. I saw a lot of disturbing things, but the one that sticks out to me was related to an SA case. The report involved a father allegedly essaying his 7-year-old daughter. The case went from a civil case handled by CPS to a criminal case. It turned out the police searched the home and found an entire thumb drive of the father taking pics of the SA he was perpetuating against his child. And there were some very egregious things happening in those pics. At the criminal proceedings, I was required to appear as a witness since I was the person who conducted the initial investigation. During court, the county prosecutor displayed every single picture to the jury on a giant projection screen as evidence. For hours, I had to sit and see picture after picture of the most heinous sexual things a child could possibly experience. Really messed me up. I had to go to therapy and had nightmares for weeks. What's worse, he was found guilty but only sentenced to 18 months in prison thanks to our shitty justice system. I saw a man trip into an approaching train that still had a decent amount of speed. He hit the front of the train, the tracks, the front of the train, then was jettisoned to the side of the train like a rag doll. Dude survived the initial incident, but died at a hospital later. I was at an air show and was standing in a non-spectator area out on the tarmac next to an airplane. A group of skydivers began the show, as is often the norm. One of the skydiver's chutes didn't open properly. He cut it away, but then his reserve chute candlesticked as he came down. He struggled with the cords and desperately tried to get air inside the chute. He gave up about 5 seconds before he hit, probably accepting his fate. He landed about 100 feet from me in a grassy area. He bounced 4 times. I'll never forget the sound of his body hitting the soil, or the visual. It was awful. When I was a kid, I had a couple big procedures that landed me in the children's hospital. I was there a few times, but the last time they put me in a room next to an infant. I obviously don't know all the details, but I could tell it was a newborn who had a large enough surgery it needed to stay longer than a few days to recover. Disturbing part is that I never saw the parents. I was there for 2 weeks. I had brain surgery that round, and I was constantly up being catheterized due to urine issues, and that baby screamed for hours on end with no one to care for it but nurses. I never saw anyone who wasn't a hospital employee walk into that room. I still think about that baby. It's been almost 10 years. I watched my dad cut my twin brother down out of a closet when we were 11 years old. My brother hung himself with a tie. We lived out in the country, so it took a long time for the ambulance and police to arrive. My mother performed CPR on him the entire time we waited, but in hindsight, he was very, very gone. Skin the wrong color, deep lines in his neck, and he had urinated all over his pants. I'm 34 now, and it still hurts. It just hurts. It was deemed an accident because the toy shelf he was standing on was broken beneath him. Makes me wonder if at 11 years old he even knew what he was doing, or if he really wanted to go through with it. How afraid he would have been in his last moments. Maybe he didn't actually want to die, but he's gone now. This is tragic on so many levels, besides the obvious for your mother, your father, and yourself. But you'll just have to wonder if it was intentional or accidental. Seem to have a good perspective. I'm sorry for your family's loss. A car lose control in an overpass with black ice, bounce off one guardrail, go across 2 lanes and kind of cartwheel over that guardrail, flip at least 4 times down an embankment. Rear window exploded and luggage and clothes flew out, then a person flew out. My dad stopped and ran down to try to help. The person was a child. We found a couple of articles online about it, and they were on vacation, and the kid was 10, permanently paralyzed from a broken neck. The mom broke a few bones, the dad was driving and he was fine. I think about that a lot. I can close my eyes and see that dark shape against the snow, flipping through the air. I hate that I'm able to recall it so vividly. I was surprisingly calm at the time, but a day later I freaked out and cried for the first time. Dude with a severe traumatic brain injury after a car accident. This guy was tucked away in a back corner room in the neurosurgical ward, lying on his side, nothing on but a sheet over his privates, drooling and making animalistic sounds. Apparently had been there for months because they didn't know what else to do with him. It's been over 13 years and I still haven't forgotten the sight. No idea what the circumstances of the crash were, but drive safe, folks. When I was a kid, 7 or 8-year-old, me and my friends were playing outside. We lived in large settlements with apartments. Then we hear a woman screaming and 2 guys holding her in front of a building. A lot of people gather closer, so do we, and we see her whole arm is destroyed. Blood everywhere, bones sticking out. Ambulance came pretty quick. Takes woman. Later that day, we find out her child, little girl about 5 years old, found a hand grenade and activated it. She saw that and took the grenade away, and it exploded while she was trying to throw it into another room. Nobody died. Woman lost her arm. Child was safe and alive. Her husband brought the grenade from war. After reading some of these, mine seems a little lackluster. Anyways, I was a housekeeper at a hotel a couple of years ago, and at this one checkout I was doing seemed normal at first, until I saw the bathroom. There were 2 bath towels, 3 hand towels, and 4 washcloths absolutely drenched in blood. There was also a little bit of blood on the bed sheets. My conclusion was someone had a very unfortunate time to have their period, or someone died. I'm a pharmacy tech 3. I worked in a level 1 trauma hospital years ago. One of my duties was to compound emergency IVs for stroke patients that were admitted to the ER. This was a critical drug that needed administered in the minute range, so as soon as I had gotten it, made it past clinical check, I would take it and literally run to the department it was needed, usually the ER, but it varied. One night, I ran my IV bag down there, and there was sort of a myriad room you had to pass before you reached the front of the ER, where you'd ask the receptionist where blah blah room was or have it carried elsewhere. In the process, I saw someone who had a ruptured artery in their neck. There was blood all over them, the floor, and all 4 or 5 of the attending people in the room. It was a second or two that I passed this room and glanced inside, but I remember it vividly. The patient's bulging, terrified eyes standing out in a cheesy, pale face, their mouth gaping and flooding their front with bright red arterial blood, fingers clawing at the sheets, the smell of copper in the air, the sound of squeaking shoes on the floor. It occurred to me then that I was watching someone actively die, that from college I knew that this was an injury you couldn't recover from, and I had just seen someone in their death throes. It was like 3 a.m., and I had 5 more hours to work and ruminate on this. I dropped off my IV, took the long way back to the pharmacy out the front door, went to the bathroom and puked my guts out. I only knew what happened because I went to an EMR and looked. I was so disturbed by that, I had nightmares for years. I work from home now doing pharmacy PAs, F the ER so much. I don't have the soul for that. Props to you ER nurses and docs. Y'all are real ones. I was driving to Santa Barbara with my family on a 2-lane mountain road at night. While rounding a corner, I saw a cloud of dust, and then there was a man lying on the road in front of me. I barely missed him, and I pulled over. I turned on my hazards and called 911. Luckily, the cars behind and ahead of me stopped. Turns out a motorcyclist had lost control at high speed and hit the mountainside. He must have been 200 yards in front of me. By the time 911 answered, there were a dozen people helping him. I asked the 911 operator what to do, and they said to go on. There was nothing more I could do to help. I read later he lost his arm and leg, but survived. On a trip to Belize helping renovate an orphanage, it was late at night, and we were driving back to the compound from one of the local villages. I was falling asleep when a motorcycle passed us going super fast. I remember thinking how loud it was and being mad as I was beginning to doze off. A few minutes later, we rolled around the corner toward the compound and are faced with a crashed motorcycle and 2 bodies on the ground, a lot of blood. Apparently, it was 2 underage kids, one 16, one 18, who had gotten drunk and decided to go for a late-night joyride. They tried to overpass the Jeep we were following, the orphanage owners, but clipped the corner of the bumper and flew. The younger one died on impact, and the other was barely clinging to life, vomiting up blood for over 30 minutes while we waited for the ambulance to get there. In the end, the ambulance claimed it was too far to come, so our pastor and the orphanage owners had to load the kid into the back of the pickup truck and drive him to meet the ambulance. Continued to basically puke up organs the entire way. And apparently the ambulance crew argued about who would sit in the back with the patient while he was just sitting there dying. So effed. I thought for sure he would die, but I guess he survived. This was over 12 years ago now, but that image of the bodies on the pavement in the headlights still sticks with me. I worked for a disaster cleanup company and would do death claims to earn extra bonus money. I would go in after suicides or murders, brain splatter, of course blood. One woman had grabbed the bedpost when she died, and we had to cut the bedpost to remove her hand as it had atrophied.